Thank you for having me, Michael. This is really a pleasure.
So part of YumiWe is as a social impact organization, right? And so you and I have been in Japan a long time, and so there's more people, as we know, over 65 per capita in the world and less under 15. And so YumiWe is not necessarily a charity, in my opinion. It's more about how can we look at different segments of society. When you look at the 127 million people in Japan, and this is projected to halve by 2100, that means the working numbers are going to maybe halve. That means that we're going to have to really be firing on all pistons by the time 2100 comes along. And so in the work we're doing with YumiWe, it's looking at who's marginalized, and to a great degree it's the 33,000 kids presumably that live in the orphanages, the 600 orphanages. And then we have 15,000 in foster care, right? The United Nations Human Rights Watch wishes it was the other way around, that there was more kids in foster care than orphanages. But then there's also the reality that a lot of the money also is at the top of those over 65-year-olds. So the question is, how could we empower our youth that are coming out of the orphanages and the homes to have a skill set to maybe interview people who have lived before radio, before television, before Twitter and TikTok. And they don't want to be sitting in the corner where everyone's tweeting and talking to each other online, etc. And so we went to an MBA class at Waseda, and we asked this MBA students, how could we connect youth with the elderly? And by no means think of you as elderly, but you're a father.
That makes me know about it. Okay. 4 sons, yes.
Yeah. But more importantly, how can we connect the youth with the older generation? And I think it's really through YouTube and maybe interviewing them. And I think it's not only the skills that you certainly have in your podcast of setting up the studio and the lighting and the cameras, etc., and the people in this room, for example, but then further editing it, using the software to edit, which you know very well, adding subtitles, and the fact that we just went through a pandemic, and some of us didn't lose people, and I think the opportunity to have interviewed them is come and gone for some people. Right? And so whether it's in Japanese or Swahili or English, recording people's life stories, I think, is important. And taking even the audio, and we have a channel on storycorps.org where basically it's an NPO for people to have interviews like this. And then upload them to the Library of Congress. So future generations, your son's children could listen to this interview in the future and hear what you have to say. But I think also the reason we asked you here is because you're clearly not only a community leader, but you're also building a community with your podcast, and you're interested in everybody's story, and you're letting everybody, as much as possible from all different walks of life talk, including myself. Yes. And so we're looking at community leaders, we're looking at community builders, and we've really been fortunate enough to have a lot at YumiWe, helping us in what we're trying to do. So that's kind of the premise of today, but by no means me interviewing you yet.
Okay.
Right? So that's the premise. So we appreciate you being here today. Mm-hmm. So there is like a list of questions that are kind of general, and I'm just going to start with a really general one. So can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and what you were like as a child?
Okay. I was raised, first of all, in Los Angeles, California. Born in 1952, which makes me 70 years old this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
This year I turned 71 at the end of the year in October.
Okay.
I had a pretty happy childhood, I think, up until, I guess, around age 4. The reason why I say that is because at age 4, my father took me and put me in kindergarten. I had a late birthday, so I was the youngest in the class. And then I quickly got a bully. I had never had a bully, and that created torment. Fast forward, it was pretty chill all the way through. We had a maid. I'll never forget that. My mother and father had a maid because both of them had to work.
Right.
And Maria used to come in and help us. I had an older brother who's 5 years older, And then I have a younger sister at the time, before my youngest was born, Valerie. Then around the age of, I'd say 6 or 7, my mother and father started to argue quite a bit. By the age of 7, they divorced.
Mm.
I chose to stay with my father,
Mm.
even though it was intermittent, going back and forth from my mother to father.
Mm-hmm.
But my true desire was to stay with my father.
Mm.
I wanted to be with him the most.
And that was in the 50s.
That was in the 50s, yeah. I was born in 52, so it was in the 50s. That continued. I went from, I only had 3 elementary schools I went to. 3 different elementary schools. So my family was pretty stable because my mother and father became friends after they divorced.
Right.
So my father was always taking care of my mother, so we always had a place. I never remember not having a place, a roof over our head, or having clothing, or being able to eat. I never had that issue.
Mm.
And when my mother decided to move to the East Coast, I guess I was about 13 or 14.
Mm.
And when she moved there, I opted to stay with my father in California, because who's going to be with him?
Right.
That was the question. So she moved there. My brother was already out of school, out of college, and he was staying in the East Coast because he worked for the government.
Mm.
So my mother took my 2 sisters, went to the East Coast. I stayed with my father throughout junior high school, and it was a ball. I mean, I loved it. He told me as soon as he knew it was just going to be he and I, that these are the rules. Whatever you mess up, you clean up,
Mm.
right? He would cook. I didn't cook, so I still don't today. I wish I did, but he would cook for me. He worked at the post office, so he had graveyard shifts. That meant that he left at 5 o'clock in the evening and would come back around 2 in the morning. So I'd be home all by myself. And I've been riding motorcycles since I was 10 years old.
Mm.
My father allowed me to take one of our Edgers. We had a lawnmower and an Edger. They both had engines on them. And they let me take the Edger engine off and make a motorcycle out of it.
Wow.
Put it onto a bicycle frame. I learned how to
Wow.
do all that. So that was basically, my childhood was just, it was good in that respect. Growing up with just my father and his older friends who would come over all the time.
Yeah.
My father pretty much just went to work and came home.
Right.
We talked till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes.
Wow.
I got a job at a liquor store.
Right.
So I've always been working too,
Yeah.
as far as I can remember. And he was very prudent with his capital.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't invest as most people invest, but he always saved.
Right.
He always had capital. Even when he passed, he left us an estate.
Right.
He owned his home, and he had his insurance. He was very prudent that way.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. And my mother, a little different. But she was the first black proofreader for the Los Angeles Times in 1962.
Wow.
And I think that caused some of it. She was very, very sharp.
Mm.
Very, very sharp. And then when she went to the East Coast, I think she worked for the post office there too. Because she worked in LA there, but then she got the time, with the Los Angeles Times, got that job as a proofreader and did that. And I didn't grow up with my sisters, so I didn't really know them well.
And you have a brother and a sister? Or
I
how many
have an
siblings?
older brother and 2 younger sisters.
I see.
My brother's 5 years older than me, so we weren't close.
Right, right,
But we've all become close now. So my mother's 94 years old.
right. Wow.
She still bowls. She's a bowler, an active bowler. I think she stopped now, but she was bowling up till last year.
Wow.
She lives in San Bernardino, moved back to where she was born.
I see.
A very beautiful home. I visit her yearly.
Right.
We talk on the phone very often. I can call her now. And she's quite active, and she's very good with the modern technology.
Have you done an interview with her? Have you done a podcast?
She won't
with
do
her?
that. She won't do it. But Mother, you're gonna find this out. But I've been recording you every single time
Good.
we get on the phone. I have my little camera like this, and I'm
Uh-huh.
recording it so she doesn't see it.
Yeah.
But I mean, and when I was over there, I had my camera up like this. I was recording. My sister and I were there, and I'm recording her because she won't do it. And I got a little upset, saying it's not for me, Mother.
Sure.
It's for my children or their children.
Mm.
Now you have a very, very colorful history, but she doesn't think so.
Right.
She's a victim of her era,
Mm.
as we all are. The time we grow up and the conditions you grew up in. But she's a lovely woman. I really like her quite a bit. I love my mother, I should say, not like her.
One of my friend's moms she's Japanese but lives in Texas. And she comes back to Japan to see her kids, who obviously live here. So there's one in Texas and one in New York. But once she got back here, it's almost like her memories opened up, and she was telling us stuff from the 30s as if it was yesterday.
Yes.
And even her daughter was like, I don't remember hearing those stories before. So it was interesting that we could hear that, and I'd love to do an interview with her to capture those memories, just simply because it's new stuff even now.
That's right. And again, even when I had the podcast with you,
Yeah.
the same thing. The thing that I like about the most in having a podcast is therapeutic for me, because when I start hearing people's stories, funny enough, I have dreams about them too.
Right.
And it's so enriching just to see the variety of lives we have, but yet how common they all are.
Right.
And I like to see the faces change as they go back in time.
Yeah,
They think it's going to be an all surface
yeah.
interview, and then I say, what were you like when you were a little kid? And all of a sudden you can see them that little 5-year-old boy or whatever. I
Yeah.
love it. It's really, really.
And I think one of the things from COVID, it makes us realize that, we can focus as much as we want on people's differences, but the reality is we have so much more in common. We all just want our loved ones to be safe and happy, period.
That's right.
And
Including
eat.
ourselves.
Yeah, including ourselves.
That's
And so I think it was, they say beautiful things come from horrible things, like whether it's a beautiful sunset night in Los Angeles through the pollution, still pretty colors, right?
It's the yin and the yang. You
Yeah.
have to have it. It's up the down. And yes, that's all part of life. And it depends on how you decide to focus on it. It's that half glass theory.
Right,
Either you see it half full or you see it half empty.
right. Right.
So,
And sometimes in the coaching we say empty the glass completely and don't look at it through what you've experienced up until now. And so it's important also to just maybe not filter things through the lens you're looking through, so to speak. And so I think that's also what's interesting about your podcast, if I will, is that you're really meeting all these different people and listening to their stories and digitizing to a great degree these stories that none of us would hear unless we met all those people, right? And I think, our purpose in life is for our souls to meet,
right.
whether one's religious or not. I think, like sometimes in your podcast I got choked up, but then somebody said to me, well, that's your soul coming out into the physical world.
Right.
My mentor, Yuki.
After he saw it?
Well, every time, and it makes me feel better about not getting emotional, but the reality is, I think that's true.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see people all the time, and I think like this. I like quotes because they sum up everything in very small, just one sentence or a couple of words. I heard one recently that I really love. Most people are always focused on the length of their life.
Mm.
And then, even when they get to the length of it, they're about to die, they forgot the journey.
Right.
So he said, instead of the length, let's focus on the width of our life.
Mm.
You're not guaranteed how much time you're going to have,
Sure.
so focus on the width. Enjoy those moments. My reason for having the podcast is because I live in an environment where many of us as expats in the community we live around, we're very transient in most cases.
Mm.
We might know each other for decades, but not know each other.
True.
Don't know if you have a brother or sister, the things that make you you. What makes Michael Michael?
Yeah.
Those are the things I try to get out whenever I'm talking on the podcast. What kind of person are you? Were you more academic or are you more sports-minded?
Mm.
Give me a ball, don't give me a ball. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And that's when you find the person you say, and then you find the calmness, the commonalities of us working with each other other than just Fortune 500 company or being an entrepreneur.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So those are the things that make a big difference.
I mean, it was Bob Proctor that said if you look at the hourglass of sand, a lot of us can be very conscious of how much sand is at the bottom. But we don't know how much is at top.
Have no clue.
So if we focus on the present, which is another word for gift, and the now, and really just staying in the present moment, I think is what we're trying to also convey to everybody. Let's not worry about what's going to happen in the future. It's unfortunate what's happened, no one chooses to be born, and whatever happened to you when you're growing up was not necessarily your choice. But if you focus on the present and being in the now, then you can navigate pretty well.
Right.
Yeah.
I like to tell people the gift of you being born, what that is, regardless of what it is. You're in the largest race you'll ever have in your whole life. At one time, I like to think the universal force, if you're religious, you can say God, or whatever you say, Muhammad, whatever term you use for the unknown, the unknown. At one time, you had a 1 in a 300 millionth of a chance of being here, experiencing this thing we call life.
Yeah, true.
Okay?
Yeah.
You had to be the fastest swimmer, the fastest runner. You had to think, outmaneuver everybody to get to that one point, then turn around and say, losers, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if you think about all of the people that could have been here, your chances were less than any lottery you could ever imagine of being a human being.
Yeah.
Your chances were almost unbelievable. Now that you got here, there's only one thing you have to do. Die. But until then, you can make it up.
Yeah.
You can create or change things to make whatever you want.
Yeah.
That's what this journey is about. That's how I like to look at it.
I mean, before this meeting, I had a meeting where I said, you know, what are 3 things you don't want to happen? That was an exercise we did. What are 3 things you don't want in life? And then Yuki taught us, now what's the opposite of that? And somebody had said die. And I said, then what's the opposite of that? You know, live. And so, and it's not just living, but like you living a purposeful life, living an intentional life, right? And so, you know, there was a book called Einstein's Dreams where at the end of the day, people would hear the clock go off at 5, and they would take out 2 pieces of paper. One was a map to the market and their home, and the other was a grocery list. So they follow the map to the market, they buy everything on the list, and they go home and knock on the door and introduce themselves to their wives. And they would go in and have dinner, and afterwards they wouldn't sit and talk about the bills and the kids. They'd run upstairs and make love. Because in this world there's no memory.
That's neat, I like that.
Because, you know, memory breeds boredom, routine, habit. So the next day, people are feverishly writing in their journals, and you see people, the older they get, like me, and I'm like, it's a DVD, I forget the tracks that I have. And you see people saying, hey, I used to be a ballerina, or hey, I used to be in the Marines.
Right.
But they can't go through the entire memory of their lives in that journey. But it's an interesting concept.
I like that. I like that. That's very nice.
Yeah. So another question.
Okay.
Do you remember your grandparents, or do you remember even your great-grandparents?
I don't remember my great-grandparents, but I remember my mother's parents.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there's a picture of them in my office. I've always kept a black and white picture, even though they have a color picture. I like the black and white one. My grandfather and my grandmother. And they were the matriarch. She was the matriarch, no doubt about the family. It's interesting, there's a book that I read not long ago, and I think Oprah Winfrey was one of the authors in it. It was called What Happened to Our Parents?
Okay.
Or What Happened to You, or something like that. And it helps to explain your parents in a way that you may never have thought about them before. They had a life too. They had things happen to them too.
Yeah.
Their parents weren't necessarily any better than they were to you. We tend to pass down what we learn.
Yeah.
I knew my grandparents. Matter of fact, my grandmother's the reason why I'm married to my wife today.
Wow.
Because when I went to her, she wrote me, interesting, and she had several grandchildren. Because I think in her family, Uncle Freddie, Uncle Bobby, Aunt Lucille, my Aunt Betty, Aunt Barbara, my mother, and Uncle Francis. So she had 8 kids. The last one, Uncle Francis, had Down syndrome.
Your grandmother had 8 children.
8 children, yeah, which was not uncommon
No.
at that time, of course. My mother was born in 1928,
Yeah.
so that was very, very common. And she was, I'm not sure if I think my grandmother was born in Barstow,
California.
California.
Ghost town.
Yeah, but she grew up in San Bernardino or something like that anyway, but I know that her ancestors were from North Carolina, because we have a family reunion there.
Oh, wow.
And the 3 families built it up, and we're on our 117th. We do it every year.
Wow.
Religiously. I took my sons and my wife there.
Excellent.
And so they are our 101st family reunion. You need that to, okay. So anyway, my grandmother wrote me a letter, and she said, Lance, I don't think I'm going to be here another year. Good health as far as I know.
Right.
And I'm not living there, I'm living in Japan.
Right.
And she said, I want you to come home for us to talk. And I kind of wanted to brush it off, but I showed the letter to one of my staff who happened to be African American, and she said, you know, it's kind of a shame that you even showed me this. If my grandmother asked me to come home, I'd be there. So she kind of embarrassed me, so I went home. She sets me up and she sits me in her den that has all the family's pictures all over the walls. I pasted up there. Of course you look for yours. Yeah, and with your family and my kids and stuff. She said, oh no, matter of fact, I wasn't married yet. I wasn't married, but I saw my picture and my sisters, my brother. And she said, Lance, she said, are you thinking about getting married? I said, sometime. She said, do you have a girlfriend? I said, well, yeah. She said, well, I said, Grandma, she's Japanese. And she said, and you're black. I said, exactly. And she said, are you looking for a girl that's, African American? And I said, yes. She said, are there any over in Japan? I said, there's a few. And she said, well, I said, Grandma, they came to Japan to get away from black men. Right. They didn't come there looking for them. And she said, well, are you coming back to the States? I said, no. Not anytime soon. I have a business there. And then she said, how long have you been with your girlfriend? I said, 5 years. She said, you live together? I said, no, we don't live together. I won't do that. My mother would warn me against that. She said, don't do it. Because if you break up, it's just like being married. Yeah. So she said something that seemed very profound. The fact that she said she would be there the next year, and I thought she'd be there forever, of course. She said, don't you think 5 years is a lot of time to waste? And just something about the way she said that, it kind of hit me. I'd never had a girlfriend for 5 years. Right. So I went home, I went to LA, and I said, Dad, if I married someone Asian, would that bother you? He said, well, you're the one who has to wake up and look at her every morning. I said, Mom, I said, Dad, look, I'm serious. He said, so am I. Because I had some belief that my father would be upset if I didn't marry within our same ethnicity. Right. And he said, no, that's on you.
That was your own belief.
That was my belief. Yeah. He never said that. Yeah. So I went back, and I told my girlfriend, I said, would you be interested in being engaged? She said, yeah. And I said, okay, I want to talk to your parents and make it, legit with the whole time. So I went over to the house, because I met her parents the second date. When I wasn't thinking about her in any way, other than a friend, and she invited me over to her Japanese home, and I wanted to see it. Right. So I went over there, and I ended up moving 5 minutes away from her in the same area with the same size house, because I was teaching at the American school. Right. So she lived in Mitaka, and I lived in Mitaka, but I lived in Kamenejaku, she lived in Shimanejaku. And her mother still lives there. They have a house they have there. I saw the old house, the one that they built afterwards. But anyway, so I asked her to get engaged, and gave her the ring, asked the parents. They said 50-50 was their belief, their feeling. And I said, why? And the father said, well, 50% of his feeling is he believes of watching me that I'd be able to provide for his daughter. And I had lied to him, and he didn't know this about how much I made. No, but let me tell you this, Michael, I made a lot more than I told him. I see. I made it seem believable to him. Right. Because I was already at a gymnastics program, I was a teacher at the American school. I had a lot of money. I just bought a brand new red RX-7, cash. Right. But I didn't want to say anything to embarrass him. I was advised not to say how much I made, so I said I made, was it $3 million a year, something like that? I don't know, it's more than $3 million a year. Sure. But he said, the other 50%, I said, oh, here it comes. Half of it he thinks I'd be able to provide for his daughter. The other half reason why I didn't think it would work, I said, he's going to say because I'm black. I know that, I know, here it comes. He said, because of the culture. Well, that makes sense. Right. Our cultures are different. Right. And I said, but something you may not realize, most people in the same, the divorce rate of people in the same culture is higher than that of people that aren't. Even if you make the percentages based upon the amount. Yeah. And I think one reason is because they're always learning each other, but the same culture thinks, I'm going to make you the way you're supposed to be.
Yeah, interesting.
The other one says, I don't know how you are, and I probably never will. Let's try to make this work.
True.
Which is the best way, really. You're saying, that's new to me, 10 years or 20 years into it. I didn't know that you did that. You can make it up. Yeah. But the same culture, you're trying to mold that person into what you think they should be.
Right, interesting.
And it really becomes hard. That's why we don't get along.
Instinctive.
You're going to be just like my brother or my sister.
Who are the
Oh,
two
big
people
influence.
that have had the biggest
Mm.
influences on your life?
The two people.
You said your father.
Yeah, my father and Muhammad Ali.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He's the reason we call Yumi We.
He's had an influence on so many people, but mine is an African American because he gave us our manship back.
Right.
We had been messed with so much. I don't know if I can say it. I'm going to tell you, in my 60s, I finally came up with the analogy as to why I do not want to live in the U.S.
Mm.
I couldn't think of a good analogy, and I finally came up with it. Imagine, which is not hard to do, my parents were not abusive by any means, but you being raised by abusive parents.
Right.
What they do is, they tell you they love you, and you're a child. They tell you they love you, they hug you, they kiss you, give you good food, and then when you least expect it, they show you a picture of you getting hurt really bad. And that's traumatic. And no, stop, mommy, don't do it. And they keep on showing the picture, and you say, I don't want to see it. And they show it, and then they take it away and say, don't worry, okay, I'm sorry. Then they hug you again. And they keep on doing that.
Mm.
Now, to add insult to injury, you're young. When you get older, you start realizing they tell everybody in the world about how they traumatize you.
Mm.
I said, Mom and Dad, but I love you. I'll protect you against anyone. And that will never change because that's emotionally impacted in me. I will protect America with my life.
Right.
But Mom and Dad, I cannot live with you.
Right.
And you've done me a big hardship by telling everybody in the world how you traumatized me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's come on. When you're a little kid, you don't know.
Yeah.
But then when you get older and you start traveling, they look at you and they go, well, I know where you come from. I know your parents treat you.
Yeah.
So why would you should be lucky. I don't treat you the same way or worse. What? Because the hierarchy in America, white, Asian, Hispanic, dogs, and then black people. Because if they did the dogs, what they do to my people, and televised it, America would not exist. It could not survive.
Interesting.
They couldn't do that to a dog. Shoot it and leave it in the streets?
Right.
And it's helpless, as you can see this. It only had a bone in his mouth, if it even had that.
Yeah.
No, it's just no. But, and then again, having said that, let me tell you where I am in my world. Of course that makes me feel bad on the surface. But intellectually, and now even emotionally, I realize that it is not an ethnic issue. It's a human one. There's not a place on this planet where we won't find human beings doing that or worse to the same people.
True.
Not mine, to theirs. And even worse, the only thing is they don't publicize it.
Right.
They don't tell everybody. They don't have the means to, or they care not to.
Right.
But oh yes, most definitely. If they didn't do it to everyone in the world, you wouldn't have child trafficking. You wouldn't have adult trafficking. You wouldn't have the atrocities happening over the world that will continue to happen. Maybe, yes, maybe my people have been shot, but as far as man goes, they used to put them on rack. The Inquisition, what was that? You think that was pretty? You think that was pretty? And they just did it for fun. They put people, burning people at the stake. Listen, that's what we do as human beings.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at it from that standpoint, I love my family because they've done this. Even though the person they made president wasn't of the same ethnicity, because his parents were never, ever slaves. Right? But he looked like that. That was a big step. For what is supposed to be the most powerful country on the planet, and they allowed him, and he didn't get killed. Every time he got open, we were going, please don't put Kennedy on, please. Everyone thought that was only a matter of time. He's going to say, that's going to be it. But he made it. So I have to love my parents for that. And they give you the best, and they take it from you. And then now they're counting on how much time it takes to kill us. Put the knee on one guy, and the other guy gets beat up. And they said, 15 minutes with him. The other guy was 8 minutes, 34 seconds, or whatever. Sad stuff. But it's a human issue. It has nothing to do with ethnicity.
Right.
It's what we do as human beings.
Yeah. And this is going on in a different direction. However, like MAGA, Make America Great Again, and someone said, even that comment is racist because has it ever been great for African Americans?
Or Indian. Wait, let's talk about the original Americans who they've almost exterminated.
Exactly.
And many of the tribes they did.
Yeah.
American Indian. And then they say the same thing, abusive parents. What about you? Would you like a couple of casinos?
Yeah.
You're trying to make it up. That's what you got. You kidding me?
Yeah.
You're gonna give me a casino, but still there's liquor stores all on my tribe and my whole plantation. And we get a couple of casinos. This is what they did in Africa.
Yeah.
They did in Africa. See, there's so many things that we do as human beings that are so psychologically damaging, but yet we don't see it for what it is. I remember as a little kid, they used to have on TV all the time, 1 cent. This little kid with an extended stomach because of poverty and stuff. 1 cent. It only takes 1 cent to save this little starving African kid. And he did, but hold on. But you know what that was doing psychologically to everyone else who wasn't of color? I'm worth more than 1 cent.
Yeah.
But he's only worth 1 cent.
And I know you could get by on 1 cent.
1 cent.
Mm.
You remember that?
Yeah,
The little kid
I
had
remember
1 cent.
I remember.
What that picture said was anyone of color.
Mm.
It told anyone that wasn't of color. So that's why we struggle and say, let me be lighter. When we start talking about shades, well, I'm not that dark. You know?
Yeah.
But you don't want to be associated with anything of color because psychologically you've been told by society, do you know, don't do 1 cent?
Mm.
1 cent.
Yeah.
Save this person's life.
I mean, Dr. Maya Angelou said America's an interesting thesis because we're all different and we're all from different places and yet we're all still Americans, right, allegedly.
That's right.
Right? And Americans came from Africa. It's that they brought Africa with them. And so like in your family, your grandmother calling you and you going, right?
That's right.
Most people wouldn't do that. And I think even if the elders are asking them to come, they probably wouldn't, or they wouldn't take the time out of their day.
But there was some kind of family they grew up in, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But we've always been close.
But I think, from my experience, the African American culture is very much still based on the culture that they brought with them, like respect to the elders. Like if you're walking down the street and you need to ask someone directions, you most definitely can ask the people coming out of a church who happen to be, you know, African American grandfathers and grandmothers. They'll help you, right? And I think, you know, not eating until everyone's had their helping. So there's a lot of things within the culture I also think that's very rich that people should learn more about, right? So Muhammad Ali
And my father.
was an influence of
The
yours.
influence,
And your
because I
father.
think through his history, through the width of the life that he lived, he was always not only talking about what he felt about his culture, he was very much an activist, he was living it and he was showing it.
Mm.
He walked the talk.
Right.
And it made you feel so proud. And yet, he wasn't the kind of fighter who brutalizes people. There were many times he'd say, will you please call a halt to this?
Yeah.
You can see, this man doesn't have a chance, will you please stop it?
Yeah.
And you couldn't help but admire that.
Yeah.
He truly boxed. He didn't beat people to death, he
Yeah.
boxed them.
Yeah.
And
And
I
he tired people out.
He knew how to
Like
do
George
it.
Foreman.
Broke the dope.
Yeah.
He talked about pulling on his head and getting his college weekend. But he was really, really young. And that's the one person I wish I had met before he left. But still, his spirit touched me in a way that I cried when I think it was 84 Olympics, when he lit the torch.
Yeah.
And I saw him and my sons were young, and I started crying and said, that's the greatest, you know. It was just so good.
Because I'm cautious about quoting this because I have to go back and read it. But I think when he was getting, I think, an honorary doctorate at Harvard, they asked him to speak, and he just said, me, we. And that was the birth of Yumi We. Because just 2 words, I think, summed up his philosophy. And, you know, obviously there's books and movies about him, etc. And it's not surprising that he was an influence on your life.
He was.
Right.
And it's interesting, when I went to, what was it? Was it my seminar? I think we went to a seminar where the facilitator is a good friend of mine, Bob White. And he asked the question, who influenced you most in his life? And my son said me. and I think he said Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
And it made me feel so proud.
Wow.
My second son said that.
Yeah.
But I know I was included. If he said Muhammad, I'm pretty sure it was Muhammad, but me and Muhammad Ali
Wow.
influenced him the most. And that made me feel very good.
Good.
Because I think that you can only live, you have to be you can't pay for who you are. You can't pay for your word having any value. There's a movie, this is really kind of abstract, but did you ever see the first Dune?
I wish I had, because I'm almost obsessed about the remake.
You never saw the original Dune?
I was maybe too young, or I never got around to it.
The original Dune, at the end, I forget his name, the guy that led, they had these throat contraptions that if you used it, you could blow things up by doing that. But you had to have this on.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, the person that he killed, his nemesis, that he killed at the end, he only used, this guy didn't have the control and used his voice and went, "Huh!" and it split the whole ground and this person in two. And I took that as a metaphor as your word has power. If you're speaking the truth, your truth, I'm not talking about religion, your truth, and you're willing to live and die by that, it has power, tremendous power. And that's what that said to me when I saw that. I thought, wow. But Muhammad was that kind of person. My father was that kind of person. Very modest. You know, wearing the same pants. Then when you listen, well, I've got a couple more pair like same khakis.
Yeah.
But he did what he had to do. He did his job. Didn't go out much. Everyone came over to our house. They all called him Chief. How you doing, Chief? I said, Dad, why don't you become postmaster? Not interested. He told me later in life. Why? I can't show you on this unless I take that off. He showed me later in life. I kept a picture. He's my screensaver, my father. When he was in Germany during World War II, he was a tech sergeant. He made it to tech sergeant. He said they were over demolition, so they had to blow the bridges the Germans were using. All black battalion group. And I never knew whites were above it. I didn't know that when I got in the service. But the other 4 guys in my squadron did, and I felt so stupid. My father said, is it that way now? I said, I don't think so. And he said, well, those were my skeletons, not yours. That's why I didn't mention it. I said, Dad, why didn't I become postmaster? He died at 72, but prior to that, he told me, he said, when I was in the service, I loved being around all the guys. We would talk mess and do this and eat together, this and that. As soon as I got a rank that was above theirs, I had to be in charge of them, and I couldn't fraternize anymore, and I hated it.
Right. Interesting.
I don't mind being with the group,
Yeah.
but I don't want to lead the group. And I said, but you told me to be a leader. I said, I didn't tell you to be a leader. Then what does reach for the stars? You always told me to reach for the stars. No, I told you to reach for the moon. You're the one who went to the stars. I said, damn. Really, it was really interesting that way. In my company right now, it's IGC reaching for the stars. I thought he always said reach for the stars. No, I told you to reach for the moon. Well, you want to reach for the stars. And there was one advertising company, I forget the name of it, but they had a model, and they had a hand like this, and they had stars above it. And their model said, when you reach for the stars, you may not get one, but you won't come up with a handful of mud either.
True. It's a good one. Yeah.
And I like that. So my company, I have reaching for the stars. There's 6 stars.
Very
You
nice.
never know which one's yours.
Can you talk about a time you experienced doubt over your beliefs?
Doubt. Let me think. It's hard. Yes. This is good. When I was 7 years old.
Wow. That's young.
Yes. Because I was watching TV, black and white TV, and Elvis Presley was on. He jumps out of the helicopter and someone throws him a guitar and 2 girls get beside him. I presume they had blonde hair, but they were doing the twist. And he said, don't step over blue suede shoes. And I'm on front of the TV and I said, when I get around, I want to be just like him. And I went, but I can't. No one said anything to me. But at about 7, I knew I couldn't. And I couldn't even really articulate it. That night I went to bed, crying my eyes out, trying to decide who I wanted to come back as. So I said, God, please kill me,
let me go up to purgatory because I know I'm not that bad, but I know I'm not going straight to heaven.
Right.
I'll be in purgatory. Someone will pray me out. But when I come back, I was trying to think of who I want to come back as. So I thought, Superman, no. Tarzan, I like the way he acted. You know, in the jungle. Why is he the only one that can talk to the animals? Anyway. And Hercules, I thought maybe Hercules because he looked a little bit darker than everybody and he's strong, look good. And I said, no. First I thought my father, then I thought my uncle was a policeman. Michael, I finally saw who I wanted to come back as. This is 7 years old. Who do you think that was?
The Lone Ranger.
Me.
Oh, good.
But think of what a 7-year-old
Yeah.
child has to think to go through all that.
Yeah.
That's when I had doubt. And look, all this, I can't be me. And I decided I wanted to be me at 7.
Good.
That's when all the doubts started. I never doubted after that.
Yeah.
There's things I've had, concerns about, but I have always known that whatever I'm doing is me. And you know, at the end of my podcast, I always like to ask people, if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, and I think I did that with you, I think. You could go back in time now and meet the younger you. What time would you go back to, and what question would you ask? Or what advice would you give to the younger you? You want to ask me that as a question? Okay, if you were to ask me that question, I would say nothing. The reason why is because I love where I am.
Yeah.
I like the journey. As we talked earlier, without the yin, you can't have the yang. Without the up, you don't have the down. I like where I'm at this moment.
Right.
I love the fact that I'm in here talking with you. Someone's asked me to do an interview. I asked everybody. Nobody ever asked me. I love this. And I'm your first.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really do appreciate it. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I didn't get up as early as I often do today, but a lot of things you're talking about, I've been talking about before we even met this morning.
Isn't it right?
With different people, yeah. Someone said I had to have these things happen to me in order to become the person I am. And I said, why don't we say you survived those things and therefore you became the person you are. Because I think, if we really go back in time, we can never say, well, I went down path A, but I wish I'd found out path B. If you were presented that choice, you have no idea. You have no idea what's happening.
And what you'd be now. Or
Yeah.
if you would be now.
Yeah.
Had we could have had a big truck coming down, there could have been, that light could have been a train
Yeah.
at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Exactly. And we talk about how, when you're born, whether we like it or not, the reality is, you've inherited what we call legacy of faith from your ancestors, but you've also inherited a lot of DNA, especially from your mom, whatever was going on with her while she was, pregnant with you. But then what we talk about also is it's really about 6 or 7 when you start having your own consciousness about what you believe and what you think and like and don't like. So to me, it's very poignant that you decided at 7, I'm pretty much happy with who I am, which became kind of the foundation probably for you moving forward.
It was. And as I look back, that's the only thing, most definitely that became me. And I was very independent. I used to run away when my father would make me stay at my mother's house to help babysit my little sisters. I'd take them in the front yard and say, okay, now don't stay here for a little while, but don't go anywhere, and stay right here. And in about 20 minutes, you can go back in the house and stuff. And they go there and I'd run to my father's house. And it took a good hour or so to get there.
Wow.
It was across town, in LA. And I remember going in the car and looking up and just remembering certain markers so I could get back from my mother's house to my father's house. And I'd do that, and then my father he'd be there, and he'd see me come in the front door, and he'd usually be on the phone with my mother. She says, is he here there? Yeah. And he'd go, no, he's not here.
The internet.
Yeah, on the telephone, yeah. He'd be on the telephone, he'd say, he's not here yet. I'd be right there. He said, so when he comes, have you called the police? And she knew I was there.
Right.
By the way, he said, no, he's not here yet. And he let me stay for the weekend, and then I had to go back, and then she'd scold me again and say, don't you ever lie. I said, and then I'd run away again. It was hard for me not to be with him. I really loved being with my father. He was just a good guy. Even as a little kid, I remember kids would always fall down, skin their knee, which nowadays they don't know what that means. Because we pride ourselves by how many scabs we had.
Yes.
You know, if you had one on the forehead, man, that was a big fall. Both elbows,
You really
knees,
earned
and your
that.
forehead, or straight down your face. I remember all of those. They would always yell, "Mommy,"
Mm.
on the playground, and I thought I never heard anyone yell "Daddy."
Interesting.
Why always yelling "Mommy"? What about Daddy?
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is because my father was very nurturing. I remember he used to swing us and stuff, but still a man's man. You know, he just would swing us and do things like that. And my mother wasn't the touchy type,
Right.
but her mother was, but not to her.
Right.
So that's why you start to see the cycle. She didn't do it to her kids, probably,
Sure.
my grandmother,
Right.
but she did to their kids.
Right.
My mother did what was done to her.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I forgive her. She's sweet. Now you can't get away from her.
She's coming to her own.
You know, she comes in. Come here, baby, give me a kiss, dog.
But what's also interesting about what you said earlier is when you had to decide between your mom and dad,
Yes.
you didn't think, well, what you said was, well, who's going to be with him? So even as a young person, you were really thinking of the parent more than the parent thinking of the child in
Yes.
that case, which is interesting.
Mhm.
How do you think that this is like transcended to how you are as a parent?
I think I've been very fortunate. The fact that I came here after I got out of the service, started teaching the American school, and working with younger kids and getting to see their parents and really getting to know a lot of the parents and watching how they parented. And the kids that were the kids that I thought I'd like to have as my kids, I'd ask their parents what they were doing.
Right.
So my wife even asked me, "Why do you know so much about this?" Because none of us know how to parent. See, actually, the oligarchs of the past wouldn't try to parent their kids.
Mm.
They would give that to people that knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And the kids came, just like, I hate to use an analogy, but it's one that fits. Most of us don't know how to train our dogs, so who do we send them to?
Okay.
Bingo, and they come back, they know how to sit, roll over, fetch, they can do everything.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
So all our dogs do is eat and the other thing. And defecate. That's all they do, and love you unconditionally. That's all they know how to do, and tear up the furniture. I learned how to parent
Mm.
from watching parents. I remember Mormons, I liked the way they raised their kids. And not the ones who are really good at it, but some they did it through the church. I noticed either the parents were responsible or the organization they belonged to help that happen. The Jewish community I dealt with, they were pretty good. Also, Catholics they were more scattered. Because I was raised a Catholic, so maybe I'm just not going to criticize them.
Yeah.
And that Inquisition, I don't think anyone's going to forget that. Anyway. Catholicism or nothing, or die.
Yeah. Or die trying.
You understand, you? Anyway, so having the opportunity, Christian Science, which isn't Scientology, is different. Mary Baker Eddy, that group of people, it was interesting talking to them and how they raised their kids. So I started employing a lot of those, along with my salesman's traineeship, because we had a very tight-knit group while I was in the service. When I got out, with the investment company I worked with, and they work with you psychologically.
Right.
We'd get in a room like this, and the facilitator would have us do things that you can only do if you're in a room that's closed and it was just men.
Right.
And it was interesting, like stand up on the table and convince everybody you are who you think you are. But this is with nothing on.
Right.
And you had to portray what you thought of yourself.
Right.
We did stuff that really messed with people's heads, and still had to go out there and sell people. And there's something they told me that I always never forgot. They said it's easier to make it honest
Right.
than, dishonestly.
Sure.
And I thought, what? It's easy to make money honestly than it is to. I had never heard that in my life.
Yeah, so true.
It is, most definitely.
Mm.
And I went, wow. So that set me on a path too. That training, along with having the parents to watch at, then had good parenting skills, and having evidence because of working with your kids and seeing this, the ones that knew how to look in your eye, the ones that thanked you for teaching them, and the ones that would hug you before they left, and different things like that. They'd always had a little gift for you. They didn't try to own anything. They had everything was on loan.
Right.
So they would pass it through themselves to you.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. So I've raised my sons to be the same way.
Yeah.
My wife thought being a doctor and being a female, after she gave birth, she'd be endowed automatically. She'd give birth, and now I know what to do. Nope. What the hell am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ew,
Yes.
ew, look at it. Oh,
Oh.
can somebody cook this or something? Anyway, so I had to work with it. And the thing I have to say about my wife that I really appreciate, she never got between me and me disciplining my sons. And I wasn't physical, other than I
Right.
pinched them when they were young, but only with an explanation,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
either before or after. But I always explained why they were getting a pinch
Yeah.
if I pinched them. But outside of that, it was just a discussion. I would explain and talk to them. We didn't have time out. Because I believed and I learned that people do things for one or two reasons. Either to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, when it comes down to it. Anything we do is either to to gain pleasure or either to avoid pain. So, you get the pain for not doing this, and then you'll get pleasure if you do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like when they wouldn't eat, because all kids get to that stage. Not all kids, but some do, and mine did. They wouldn't eat. I didn't get upset. Because my wife said, no. I know that eventually nature's going to make them come back to they'll eat up the table afterwards.
Yeah.
But they get nothing now.
Cold broccoli.
But they're not getting anything but this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how they work.
Another word it has is empower village, because essentially the aged out youth come here and there's food in the refrigerator if they want to have a meal or if they want to do their homework.
For free.
Well, we pay for it, but
You
basically.
pay for the food?
Yeah.
Who's we?
Well, the MPO.
Only yours.
Yeah.
No one else is doing it?
No. Well, in this space, that's what we do for them, because they said they only eat once a day. So we also have a collaboration with the Legacy Foundation, with the Soul Food House,
Right.
Big Mama Special.
Okay. Right.
So they know they can go to her if they need to eat in between coming here or Second Harvest. We have an event every 2 weeks where we get them
So
groceries.
what do they do with them there?
It's called Big Mama Special. So
Okay.
you walk in and you just sit down here for the Big Mama Special and you can order off the menu and you don't get a check. Or they'll hand you a bento.
Is that really real?
It's true. I mean, I
Do a lot of
donate
people
to
do
it.
it?
Not enough, but a lot of people
No, wait a
receive
minute. How's
it.
she gonna make money? Wait, if a lot of people do it, she's gonna be.
Well, she has a lot of single parents that come in and get the Big Mama Special for takeout. And she doesn't charge. So I donate when I'm there, when the box is out in front, or, we try to spread the word.
We'll talk afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, she just,
How long has this been?
well, I mean, one of the kids, when I say kids, I call them ambassadors, because they're aged out. They're not orphans anymore, and they're not kids. Only eat once a day. Why? Because I don't have enough money. And I said, well, that's not good, because how are you gonna concentrate on your studies or anything? So first of all, they come here and we give them food or we order them food. And I don't mean everybody, I'm just our ambassadors that work with us.
How many ambassadors do you have?
Well, I have 5 that I've signed a permanency pact with, which says these are the 45 things I'll do for you. Right? So they know they have a place to come.
Okay.
With regards to Second Harvest, we try to say to them, this is not a charity. You're enjoying an asset of the community, because Charles and Second Harvest, they provide this for you. And if you don't take advantage of it, that's your choice, but it's there. And then with Legacy Foundation, there's a space that they have above the restaurant where the kids said to me, well, look, even if I go get chicken and vegetables, I don't have any pots and pans, so I can't cook this food. So I live on my own, but nobody made sure I had pots, pans, flatware, plates. So, we bought a lot of that. We had a donor that just bought everybody a pot and pan set and utensils, so they're going to give it out, probably not tomorrow, but maybe at the next session. And then Latanya does cooking lessons. She teaches them how to cook so they can cook themselves, because we don't want them in the convenience store cycle where they're buying and eating in the convenience store. It's more expensive, it's garbage, etc. And then the Big Mama Special is basically in between Second Harvest runs, or if I'm not here or nobody's here, they know they can go in there and eat. I mean,
Where's Second Harvest? Where's that located?
Second Harvest is in Sakasabashi, I think.
Isn't it Charles?
It's Charles.
Yeah.
Charles's group, yeah. So they have a slightly different thing now. Like during the pandemic, the line was down the street, around the corner, and circled around the park.
At Charles's place?
I mean, he said there's so much demand, I may not be able to keep the doors open. So we tried to get volunteers there. You know, I went to volunteer. But when I went back a couple of weeks ago, I was surprised that now it's called the Marugohan Pantry. So no one's the wiser. Marugohan, I think, means giving back, the cycle of giving back, and Gohan is God. And you just go in with the basket. It says you can take, you know, 1 bag of rice, you can take 3 of these, you can take 2 of these, and you just
Is it still
go shopping.
him? Is it still him?
Yeah.
So who's supporting him?
Oh, the greater public. I mean, whoever funds him or however way he's giving.
He was one of my sons, Lance, who really admires him. Lance had him as a teacher at Jochi for a while or something.
Yeah.
And Lance said, oh no, or Lewis? Maybe Lewis. Because Lewis was at Temple. I think he was Charles at Temple or Jochi.
I don't know.
He probably went to both, but he said because he walked his talk.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I'm happy to hear that Legacy is walking their talk.
Yeah.
That makes me feel happy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you offline.
Well, I mean, on this topic, in the homes, there's a lot of multicultural kids, right? And so I noticed one of the girls must be half African.
Yes, I saw her.
And I noticed that people don't necessarily know how to take care of her hair. And so we're getting a group of beauticians to go in without focusing on her, but go in and talk about how to groom and
But
how
the
to...
issue is they can't get the products that they need.
Exactly.
That's the hardest part.
Yes.
But the thing is, we do have access to, some people have access to what's on the base.
Yeah.
And if they can do that, that can help to a certain extent. But Japan's very hard on the chemical use.
Yeah.
Because that goes into the system and they're concerned about that, and it's their country.
But the caregiver, this girl's 7, and so the caregivers are doing the best they can, but they just don't know what to do. And so I think just getting people in to teach them different ideas of what to do, you know, for her hair, etc. So why did I bring that up?
No, we were.
We talked about, you know, well, basically what came to mind when you were talking about your kids and how people had influenced you is it takes a village to raise a child, and that's why we call it Empower Village, because I think, first of all, you know, there's either love or fear in life, right? And fear is usually based on your belief system and things that have happened to you.
Or ignorance.
Exactly. And babies come into the world as love. And they know love when they see it. They can't talk, they don't speak Spanish or Japanese or whatever, but they know it. And so I think that's kind of the beauty of what I feel we're doing, because we go in and we see the little preschoolers who come up and hold your hand and pull you in, they want to talk to you, they want to pat you on the stomach and ask why it's so big. But it's pure love, and I think the more that we can help people kind of change their belief system, and you know, with regards to not necessarily you changing your belief system, but you observing and absorbing what other people did that worked and then applying it to your own kids. I think that's really important. So just one more thing, even though this is supposed to be about you, we have a social impact bond we're trying to do for a group in Nagoya who trains abusive parents to get their kids back. Because it's $1 million to have kids in care from 2 to 18 in the orphanages to the taxpayers. And so we're hoping that if we can raise money to get him to scale, before you get married, you take this test to see if any red flags come up with your wife, right? Because there's over 205,000 abuse cases last year. College professors abusing their kids, right?
Of course, it doesn't matter.
So in this society, we just think, you know, something's amiss, but there's plenty of solutions and there's plenty of ways that we can kind of redirect it. And I think, like your example of learning from other parents, even with me, I'm like, you know, our house is chaos in the morning. And they said, well, what's the problem? I'm like, well, no one's ever ready, no one's ever dressed, no one's ever on time. And someone just said, well, why don't you prepare the night before?
You
yeah.
what an awesome idea.
Like, I better talk the talk better and walk the walk better.
But there's so many little things like that, but you get so caught up in your routine of, like I had to use it, I'll use it my way. Doesn't realize it, but you get an adrenaline, I can't even say the word, adrenaline rush when you're late or when you're doing certain things. And that becomes addictive. Yeah. So she's always rushing. You know, and then she said,
she's an adrenaline junkie.
And I said, oh, excuse me, we're just sitting down to eat, can we relax? But she's hurrying to do everything. I don't do that. Relax. You know? let's hurry up. And I tell her way ahead of time, we have plenty of time. But I know you like to wait till the last second so you can get that rush. You can just barely get there and, you know, I'll go minutes time. No, I don't want that. Just take your time.
Yeah.
You'll be
And
right.
it's interesting to observe how some people are addicted to different things.
That's true. And all of us have something we're addicted to.
Yeah.
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 You'll be right.
And it's interesting to observe how some people are addicted to different things.
That's true. And all of us have something we're addicted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, of the people that you lost in your life, who do you miss the most and what is it about that you miss?
My father. So, being able to call him.
Right.
Yeah. And let him see what I've done. I mean, see how I've lived. I like for him to see that. And I like to give him credit for a lot of that. Yeah. And Muhammad Ali, because I didn't get a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
I wanted to meet him. I just, even if he didn't say anything, I just wanted to be there
Yeah.
and be in his presence. I got to meet Michael Jackson. It's a different feeling, but
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
I felt guilty about any jokes I may have made about him prior to
Right,
that,
right.
because Michael he vibrated right to me.
Yeah.
He didn't vibrate like they tried to say about him.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I know, only he does.
Yeah, yeah.
But he was a good person, I felt. My father, I just want to spend more time.
But do you believe in the philosophy, you know, that energy doesn't really die, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like my mother
Yeah.
had red hair, and my children should not have red hair, but they have red strands in their hair. And so in a way, she's kind of moved on and shown up there. And you know, they were asking about my grandfather, who'd be 102 now, who lived in Japan, as Reason here, I think you know. And I thought, how fascinating. Here we are talking about people who have been long gone, and yet they're still in this room while we're talking about, even when you're talking about your father. Okay, big.
It's interesting that we have people in the movie industry that do such a good job of illustrating that. And that was such a good job in Avatar when he did that with the tree
Yeah.
and the souls, the
Yeah.
tree of souls, and
Yeah.
how everyone was there, they live on. I love his interpretation of that. That was beautiful. And I think we do live in a world like that. It's there.
I mean, I was in Sendai yesterday. It was a very sunny day, and I said, "What if, when we die, we just go into the sun?
That's interesting.
And what if that's the energy that keeps the sun burning, and as a result, it's lighting our path, it's warming us, and even at night, the mirror is reflecting everybody back to you to remind you that they're still there."
That's interesting.
Yeah, I like
That's interesting.
I like
That's
that
good.
idea.
That's good.
Because I think, as you know, being part of the sun, you're giving off. You're not taking anything. You're just giving of yourself, etc. And I think the energy is an interesting perspective. What are your hopes for your children?
That they learn to live the width of their life and not focus so much on the length of it. They really learn how to use the width of it. That they, I don't know if they want to have children. That's up to them. I wouldn't hope that on them. That's their choice, because it's a tremendous responsibility. I think it's the most important thing you'll ever do in your whole life is to try to raise another human being. Or try to guide them. When you don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't know what's in the dark, goes, follow me.
Don't ask me.
And then don't ask me, shoot, I'm just trying to do what you're doing. You know, and I did that many times with my sons when we'd get in maybe heated debates or something. I said, let's just hold on for a second. I don't know either.
Right.
First time for me.
Yeah.
I've never been a father before.
Yeah.
I've never been your first time being your father in this situation, so can we give each other a little slack here? You know, come on. I don't know. We're trying to make it the best we can. What we got. I hope that of course, every night I pray for my family, myself first,
Sure.
and my family. And I hope that they live a life that they appreciate. They learn to appreciate. And I want them to be a benefit to not only themselves, but whoever comes within their radius, and maybe people that will never see them. Vibrate such a way that it shows that good is there, right? I think evil is a perception,
Sure.
right? But I think good is something that vibrates in such a way that it just makes this worth something. You won the race, now let's go out there. Don't go through life like this.
Yeah.
Go through life like this.
Exactly.
Let it flow
Mm.
and enjoy it. But be aware of it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think that just brings us back to maybe the last question. Can you tell me one of your happiest memories?
Of course, this is, people say this all the time, but the birth of my children, those are all happy
Sure.
moments. Seeing them come through, happy and sad at the same time, because I know that the Bible said, which is a well-known book, and I don't know if it says this in the Quran or the other very, very famous books that have been written by people that did a lot of thinking. I hope that you're supposed to mourn a birth and celebrate a death. The reason being that when someone's born, you know, without a doubt, it's not going to be easy. You won the hardest race, but this one isn't so easy either. A lot of people check out real early. They say, okay, had enough. Someone's doing right now, had enough. And they get out of it. This is not an easy one.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to
And no one gets out alive.
No one gets, not a I haven't seen one person yet. They claim to, but no one even saw that. They saw the results afterwards.
Yeah.
They saw the place was empty. I think that is just, I think that's the biggest thing, yeah.
Yeah, I think, meeting people, and I'm sure you're experiencing this as well, I'm always surprised, when I meet people. I asked somebody, a young person, and I was kind of bored with the question, and I said, how do you want your life to end up? I ask most people like that, because I'm like, you need to be thinking that so you can work towards that. There's no way you can control how it started, but you definitely control it. Young guy, I'd say 25 maybe, and he said, well, when I was born, I was surrounded by people smiling, and when I die, I want to be smiling, surrounded by people crying. No, I was born crying, surrounded by people smiling, and when I die, I want to be smiling, surrounded by people crying.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, very profound for
That is very, very
in person. No offense.
I like it. So, yeah. What was your last question? I kind of missed it. What was the last question to me anyway? I forgot.
Oh, actually, it was one of your happiest moments, and you were talking about.
Yeah, but the birth of my son, Jay, the birth of my son, because each one was unique, and those were happy moments. They really were. I don't feel fair. I won't talk about what I weren't necessarily happy, what was supposed to be, but that was those moments. And for my wife at the time too, that someone would risk their life to bring life through.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it isn't. It is. People died from giving birth. I mean, I know I would. The thought of it, I watched that, and I went, what?
They said the closest man.
Are you going to be able to work again or walk or anything? How in the world a person comes through?
Women are magic that
and
way.
you should saw me with my camera too. I had a big SLR and my Nikon, and I had the zoom lens and everything. And here she is giving the baby, and I can see the crowd. I'm going, this is with film. And I'm taking all the pictures like that, and I'm getting the angle like this and stuff. And then I can't get these developed. What am I doing? I said, I can't. No, I started imagining the guy just going, whoa, 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 whoa. So I stood at her head and took a couple of pictures from there, as the baby being delivered. I was really in it. I mean, I took the role for sure. So I destroyed all that. I thought, what am I doing? Jeez, that's way before these. It was still film.
Yeah.
No digital.
I remember.
Jeez, I was really big time. I had my whole kid playing Earth, Wind, and Fire. She went to university playing Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Quite an experience. You should package that.
And I was the first father to ever watch his child being born at Sai Sekai. That's where my wife did her internship at Sai Sekai. And there was a female doctor who was delivering. So all the nurses came because they wanted to see my wife, because she's a doctor there too. They wanted to see her give birth. And there were only 2 males in there, me and my son.
Wow.
And we didn't know, because I didn't want to know. We never asked the sex of our child. But I kind of, because they got too excited doing the ultrasound. The only way you can know is if there's a protrusion.
Right.
He obviously had enough of the things to tell us. We know what it is. He wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah.
But it was good. All my sons are doing well, and I'm just so proud of them. All of them are in their 30s. As of this year, the youngest is 30, the oldest is 36. They all came back to Japan to be with their dad and mom, and they live close by us. I
Nice.
can walk to their homes. And one is married, and one is coming over Saturday to ask, was a good married, we've already said, okay, can he marry his wife, the girl. They've lived together, which was, I said it's you, but I wouldn't.
Right.
But they live with each other, and they're gonna get married because they're similar age and stuff. But I wanted to get married next year, so if you hear this later, I'm the one that wanted to be next year, and I told your mother to say it's better if it's next year, because she's doing this kind of feng shui,
Feng Shui.
feng shui. People say it a different way.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's looking, I said, say that it's only better if it's next year. I don't want them to get married this year.
We gotta promise this quick.
I want it to be next year.
Mm.
But they've been together for, I think, 3 years or so.
Wow.
She's sweet. She's a sharp young lady, Todai graduate.
Wow.
Yeah. She said her friends don't feel comfortable when she brings him around.
Why?
He's not Todai. You know how people get this territorial stuff.
Yeah.
Not Todai. He's my son.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
guys find out he's my son.
Yeah.
Then they'll be wishing. And like the third son got married, and his wife, they graduated from the same school, Jochi, and she came over, and he had a couple of concerns, so I had to get her together and talk with her, just me and her. And I said, you need to understand that not only did you marry one of the Lee boys, you married into the Lee family.
Right.
You're now a Lee,
Right.
and that comes with certain conditions. You build them long enough, I think you know.
Yeah.
But in case you don't, here they are.
Mm. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. Okay. Why did you decide to set up this MPO? I asked you in my podcast, why don't I ask you on mine?
Okay. I happened upon orphans and orphanages on accident because someone asked me to play Santa. And so I don't know if that says anything about me, I just was not in my consciousness that orphanages existed, even though at that point I'd been in Japan a while. And when I walked in, I noticed a lot of them were not 100% Japanese, and that kind of incensed me. I thought, I hope that's not the reason that they're in here, because I'd worked at Yokoda, and I had dealt with, who's Japanese and who isn't from the onset. And then somebody came to me, I was at the bank, and they came to me and said, we'd like to start this summer course for kids that are in orphanages. I'm like, well, yeah, of course. And so I was able to dip into money that the bank had in Asia that no one ever asked for in Japan. And so for me, it really, in the beginning, it was just about facilitating things, like let's reach into my resources and facilitate what's going on. But also, and maybe I told you this, my best friend in college, his first son had Downs. And another MPO had come to me and said that they run a bakery that hires people with Downs. And so I thought, if I can use this money to help them, then there'll be a future for Kaikun in the future. So that was kind of what was going on at the time. The truth of the matter is, now that I'm more honest, and I've spent my 50s kind of deconstructing myself, is I was abused growing up. And I know that affects you later in life. And so I feel the more we can get in touch with these kids, the better. The earlier, the better. And I think, much in the spirit of this podcast today, it's more about the community and making sure they know they're part of the community and making sure that they know they're not alone, right? And so that's the main reason I'm doing it. And I think it always comes back to you, me, we. It's all encompassed in those 3 words, which is phenomenally. What keeps me doing it is a question mark. But I think it's the village concept. The fact that I'm not going to be around forever. And the more I can try to teach these kids, it's already gone full circle. Kids that I've seen at 15 are now full-time jobs and teaching back into the homes. It's already gone full circle.
How long have you had Yumi?
Well, Yumi We was founded in 2018, but I've been in this space, I guess, 16 years. So I've seen kids that have graduated now, they're in their mid-30s, like your sons, because they were 18 then. And I had a kid really touched my heart. We went up to Tohoku with the Balloon Circus, which is a group from the UK. She's British, our partner's Thai. And they just bring a duffel bag with plates and spinning sticks, balloons, juggling balls, and it just opens up and just becomes this amazing circus. And one of the kids in Sendai walked out. He said, "I remember you guys." He was 11. He remembers us from 5 years ago. He picked up a plate and he started spinning it just like that. And I was just touched that he said, "I was wondering when you'd come back."
Isn't it nice? That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I said to them, kudos to you for coming back, because a lot of people just do it, take a group photo, and take off. But I really admire people that come back and answer that question the kid had, when are you coming back?
Yes.
So thank you very much for today.
Thank you for inviting me in. I really enjoyed this. Helped me get a lot inside to thinking. I like this. Thank you.
So this is going to be uploaded into the Library of Congress for your sons in the future. And I do hope you have on your son's interview, or all of your sons interview you going forward, because...
That's interesting.
And your wife.
I thought about that concept.
And your wife, because I think that the idea came to me when I was watching this artist that interviewed people who've survived Hiroshima. And he pointed the camera at their hands, which was around a teacup, and he recorded their memories. And then he projected the film under the dome for people sitting across the river in the park listening to what it was like, which was horrific. And I thought, what a very dignified way to interview these people, yet share their stories with people who have no idea. And in our space, we can't show the faces of people who are being protected. And yet we can share people's stories. And I think by them learning your story, for example, they don't have grandparents. They don't have 70-year-olds in their lives to teach them the stories you share with us. And some people reach 70 and don't think anyone's interested in their story, which is not true. So much in the way that there's the seed vault in Europe in case we all blow each other to smithereens and we can start growing corn again. This is digitizing, your history and digitizing your story, and we hope to do more of this and teach the kids who are behind the camera how to edit, how to do the lighting. Hopefully this is recording.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, but we've got the audio.
That's right.
But thank you very much
Well,
for
thank
today.
you so much, Michael.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.